Hello everyone, welcome to the Wundertalk. This is episode, what is this? Today it is 43 already. And today we have a very hot topic presented by one of our serial presenters, James Nesbitt from the Latvian office. And the topic today is Docker. And yeah, it's a very hot topic, evolving very quickly. I heard there's even an update today. So I'm very excited to hear what James has to tell us. So James, the stage is yours.
Okay, so yeah, there have been a number of requests lately actually to talk about Docker, and while I'm not the most technically aware person about Docker, I think I have a lot of experience with it, so I figured it makes sense to do the presentation. And so I'm going to present material that I'll probably present at an upcoming Drupal camp. But I'll just show some quick slides and go through it quickly. So first off, Docker. It is a hot topic. Everyone's talking about it, and it's been in the news a lot lately. In fact, there was just a big Microsoft partnership announced a couple of days ago, and then this morning a new update came out, as Florian just mentioned, with some really interesting stuff. So yeah, let's get into Docker. So I guess I can actually start the presentation properly. So first thing to know about Docker is to understand something about the architecture. But if I spent the next 10 minutes talking about architecture, I don't think anybody would really learn that much, and I think everyone would just be asleep. So I won't go too much into architecture, but I will start off with a few things. So first off, Docker itself is actually just a tool, and the focus of the tool is to deploy architecture or to deploy code. Docker itself is not a virtual machine or anything, even though people talk about it in that sense. The reason I say it this way is that is the corporate ambition of the organization, is they wanted to create tools to deploy code. And the first step they did was to create a tool that manages this new type of virtual machine. So when people talk about Docker, we're kind of talking about two different things. We're talking about a tool that's used to deploy code, and we're also talking about a way of managing what I will tentatively call virtual machines. When it comes to the architecture, we can say that it's about containers and not virtual machines. The big difference between containers and virtual machines I'll discuss in a second, but just to quickly explain, this technology has been around for a while. Even from some perspective, you can say that Mac OS X apps are containers because they're sort of isolated code, things put together. And that is a way of distributing containers. But the big difference is really how it separates itself from virtual machines. So a quick breakdown of a container is that by its nature, it is actually only about two things conceptually. One is it's a collection of processes or programs or servers or something running together. And the second is it's a layer of file systems. As opposed to a virtual machine. A virtual machine is an entire operating system stack, from the kernel all the way down to the user land tools, all the way down to whatever software you're running. And the reason I point it out this way is that a lot of times when we're running virtual machines, we don't actually want to be running virtual machines. We don't want to be running a full software stack. We don't want to be running two memory managers on one machine and stuff like that. It doesn't necessarily make sense. And the reason I like to talk about it as being a layer of file systems is that, especially when it comes to Docker, we have ways of mixing together different sets of file systems. Some of them in read-only and some of them read-write, which is important to us because we can keep some security concepts or some other concepts really active. Like we can isolate source code from file space, from database space. The biggest thing to talk about when we talk about containers, though, is that they are really light and really fast. First off, you can build containers very quickly, and you can start and stop them really easily and very quickly. And to give you a metric, you can start a container in about 3 seconds. And I'll show that on my local machine. So just to go over again, the big difference between containers and VMs is that containers are not a whole operating system, they're just pieces that you need. So for example, a web server and a database server running inside a container, that's all you need there. As opposed to getting the entire thing, entire machine. In both cases, we have full isolation, though. It's kind of what we want. We want to have all of the libraries and tools that we need inside an environment, and we want to have that separated from everything on the outside for many reasons, for management and for security and all sorts of stuff like that. Now, because containers are this light little process, and because they don't need a full software stack, we get a lot of options in how we use them that lead to different workflows that people are really happy about. So in particular, what I mean is we don't need to have all of the things that come with a full software stack in terms of managing it, like a full startup script, a full system D implementation, and all sorts of stuff like that. You don't need to have file system checkers and things like that. Those are done outside. We don't need to have an NTP server running to make sure that the time and the date of the machine is accurate. All those kinds of things we can do outside of containers. And that means we can run a lot of containers on a machine. In the server world, they're talking about running thousands of containers on one machine. And as a comparison, in virtual machines, they talk about running 10 to 20, maybe at the most 100. So how does Docker affect us? Or how can Docker affect us, I guess is the point. Well, I guess I'll talk about it a bit more, but really to start off and be a little bit blunt, right now for sysadmins, Docker is a fantastic tool. I don't know any system admins or people who are in charge of managing machines and code deployment who aren't excited about Docker. But for developers, I would say in the real world, Docker is not going to make a difference for you today. Although maybe this morning's press release changes that. The reason why I think comes down to the fact that right now for developers there aren't a lot of tools to manage Docker containers. And we have a lot of great environment tools that we use to manage virtual machines, like Vagrant, of course, and we have VirtualBox, which is a tool that's necessary for most of us to actually manage them. But right now there aren't very similar tools for Docker. There is Vagrant for Docker, which I will talk about in a second, but it definitely doesn't have the same impact or utility. Tomorrow, I think even like next week or the week after, that situation will likely change. But at the moment, I wouldn't say everybody, you got to switch and drop your virtual machine and start Docker now. But I will say that everybody should check it out because it's actually quite cool. In reality, because we're talking about changing the entire way code deployment goes, this is a much bigger business decision than just does Docker work for you as a developer or a system admin, because a whole lot of things would have to change. So today, no Docker for everyone. But yeah, system admins, they must be really happy. It gives you a lot of options in terms of distributing environments. Instead of distributing Vagrant files and provision scripts and so on, you can distribute much more modular pieces of applications, and you can easily manage multiple versions, and versions can be dependent on each other. And you can easily, the difference between pushing to a dev environment and pushing to a production environment, there is basically none. It's the exact same tools and the exact same syntax and the exact same process. So the only downfall with that regard, which I'll talk about in a second, is that it is not possible to get perfectly distributed kernels. So I should say that in a different way. You can't get perfectly reproducible environments. And that is because, like I said, the kernel is shared. So if you have two machines, one is an Ubuntu server and one is a CentOS server, they're technically using the same kernel, and Ubuntu has a different kernel from CentOS, and so there could be slight differences. Okay, to talk about Docker in a more positive light, in a way that could be really useful to us, it has some really fantastic advantages over the existing tools. In particular, I'm talking about, as a developer, looking at things like Vagrant and VirtualBox. When you're a developer and you're dealing with VirtualBox and Vagrant, you have two really significant issues, which, in my opinion, really affect day-to-day development. The first is Vagrant and whatever provision tool you're using, they're supposed to give us these like ideal, perfectly reproducible servers or machines. But the reality is that they fail all the time. Vagrant builds, and they fail. Vagrant provisions, they fail. For me, they fail 1 out of 2 times. And the worst is if nobody's worked on a project in 3 months. and you go back and you try and run it again, they fail hard if you just try and rebuild the machine. Linux distributions, their software repositories update, and when you mix that with hard configurations, and you haven't done it in 3 months to see what's changed in the machine, I guarantee you it's going to fail. The second big problem with running VirtualBox and Vagrant is that it's slow. It's really slow, especially when you're running, if I can call Drupal a heavyweight framework right now. If you consider that Drupal running with a database on top of a FPM, on top of Nginx, on top of a machine, then yeah, it's a pretty heavy stack, and it takes a long time. Sometimes you're playing around with Views UI and you're waiting 15 seconds or something for the page to update, which actually impacts the cost on the project. And as a quick snapshot, I find that running Docker locally on my machine as opposed to running Vagrant, it's more than half, or probably less than half the time for a typical action. And this is what happens, this is what you get when you're running just processes and not whole software stacks. The concept here is it's as though you're running your web server natively or locally. So all those people who gave up on Vagrant and running LAMP or XAMPP or whatever, RAMP or whatever these stack tools are, you get the same speed out of your processes, which is the really big advantage. And it's actually probably enough to convince some people, even just in this presentation, to switch out of using Vagrant and VirtualBox. Which is kind of what I would recommend for anybody who actually enjoys playing with these things. Anybody can make this switch to using Docker right now. It's true I use a different environment for most people, but I don't use any VirtualBox development environments anymore, and I haven't for about 6 to 9 months, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions for really complex Vagrant builds that I couldn't replicate. But I really recommend it, and I really recommend starting to get into a bit of the philosophy of splitting up the machines instead of considering one virtual machine to be the place to put everything. There's no reason to run Solver inside your virtual machine, inside each virtual machine. It doesn't happen on the live servers, so why would we do it there? I kind of did talk about it, but I'll get down to it again. What really sucks about using Docker? The biggest issue right now is that there aren't a lot of these developer tools, and in particular, there aren't a lot of developer tools for people running OS X and Windows. Which isn't true today, this morning, according to the release. But there are some tools in place just so you can run Docker, but it doesn't have the same speed. It doesn't have the same advantage. So a quick note about the tool that everybody using OS X and Windows will be using. It's called boot Docker, and it's a utility that actually runs a virtual machine in VirtualBox. So it's kind of ironic if you're trying to get away from it. If you're trying to get away from VirtualBox, you don't get away from VirtualBox. But yeah, it's a tool that runs a virtual machine that then runs Docker. So in the typical workflow cases, I'm working on one server, one Drupal website for one project. It doesn't necessarily provide any advantage. I could say it provides a little advantage because it's likely that the virtual machine you're running inside your VirtualBox is actually much leaner and doesn't have a lot of extra stuff that you don't really need. But if you switch away from this concept of just running one virtual machine or just running one project server at a time, every additional container you run provides a little overhead on top of that initial VirtualBox. So there are ways like using different workflows where you still find significant advantage. Another disadvantage with Docker right now is that a lot of the provisioning tools don't work. And it's not that they will never work, it's just right now they don't work. In particular, I had problems running the Ansible ref tool from the Finland office. I just couldn't get it to run properly. But I think it has to do more with the fact that Ansible likes to be outside, running things on the inside. And Docker has a different concept of what is the inside. The last thing to say is that really Docker as an environment, it's not so focused on web development as we are. So maybe because it's not a tool focused on our needs, it won't ever meet our needs. But really what they're trying to do is they're trying to get people to distribute applications as collections of software running. So even a web app could be run as a desktop app if it was running inside of a Docker container and stuff like that. I thought I'd go through just some examples on how different people I know inside Wundertalk are using Docker already. I don't know everybody who's using Docker. I mainly only know the Latvian offices, so those are who I can talk about. And I'll go through them in use cases, just quickly to talk about it. The first case is all three are in Latvia. The first case is Mārtiņš who's actually in Rezekne. He is running Docker using Vagrant. Vagrant has a built-in provider right now to use Docker, so it's change a few command lines or change a few configurations, and you can use Docker. You have to install it, boot to Docker, and so on if you need this. But the same workflow that we're using with Vagrant could be used with Docker. But as I already mentioned, the provisioning is kind of weak. So in Mārtiņš's experience, you can't just switch over your provisioning. It doesn't necessarily work inside. And another thing is that right now, if you're going to use Vagrant, it doesn't really provide any significant advantage over the other providers. Even if you want to get away from VirtualBox and you're running Linux, the LXC provider is actually probably much more effective than the Docker one, because Vagrant has this one concept, and that's it. As Vagrant, I'm running some virtual machines, and that's it. Maybe I'm running one, which is the most common use case. Maybe I'm running 3 or something. And all you can do is build them, bring them up, put them down. Whereas Docker has much more of this sexy stuff. Docker has much more connecting containers together, much more early provision, late provision stuff, and it has a built-in revision or versioning system. It's very easy to fork containers. It's very easy to have multiple versions of images. It's very easy to have an image that you're happy with that you then save and make the basis of all the containers in the future. This kind of thing can actually lead to pretty big advantages if you think about it, which I think I'll talk about right at the end. Another use case is Mečilis, who's in Riga. He uses Docker with a remote machine. Now, I don't know if anybody hasn't seen this process, because he did talk about it once in another talk. In particular, he's using a machine that sits next to his laptop, which is a Linux machine that runs as a server, and he connects to it. And overall, he's had really good success with it. He's quite happy with it, with one exception, and that is that if you try and do your network mapping, if you map folders from your Mac into the virtual machine, or pardon me, into the remote server that goes over Wi-Fi, you can get problems with the speed again. But right now he's connecting with Ethernet, and he says it works great. And I've seen it, the response time is great. And an interesting aspect of this is that this matches the development method. This is exactly how we would push things to production servers if we were using Docker in production. The same command line tools that Mečilis uses to create and start and stop his dev environment could be run with a different URL, and they would do the exact same operations on the production server, which of course has a big time advantage. So there's no big complicated difference between them. The last case, which I'll talk about, I'll talk one more sub case, but this is the case that I use, which is running Docker locally on my Linux desktop. And it works absolutely fantastically, with the exception, of course, that again provisioning is weak, and of course some manual effort is required compared to using Vagrant. You have to build your images, and then you have to use Docker to manage them, and then you have to start and stop them, and so on. But as a quick note, I wrote a set of scripts that I used that created, which I'll show, that they created kind of a similar to Vagrant approach. But I think I'll show them at the end, and that way Florian can cut me off if things are going too long. So then quickly, the same thing for you to do it on OS X and Windows. I talked about before using this tool boot to Docker. It's in the presentation so that you can check out the slides later if you need it. So. And the last thing I say there is that it really used to stink. I tried it on an OS X machine, and it was just rough, and things wouldn't build properly, and folders wouldn't map properly, and stuff like that. But if you read the Docker blog this morning, they say that now everything should work much better. Actually, they say it just for Mac, but I think that there's a small architecture thing you have to set up on Windows just to make it be the exact same as on OS X in terms of folder mapping, and then everything will probably work absolutely brilliantly. So if you are interested and you're on Windows or OS X machine, probably should try installing Ubuntu Docker and see how it works for you. But wait until next week for this latest release to actually get pushed out. So, this is the interesting part. As Florian said, Docker is a really big hot topic. You know it's a big deal when Microsoft approaches the company that's managing it and says, we want your tool to work on our servers as well. And they have a massive capital investment right now, and they're buying up companies left and right, this organization. They're merging basically with anybody who starts a good idea that integrates with Docker. And it's very clear that while they could just be another VM kind of option, that the world's taking them very seriously. In particular, cloud vendors. Cloud vendors are really hyped about them, and a lot of them are already offering Docker integration. I'm going to just do a quick screen demo because demos are really popular in Wundertalks, and it'll probably prevent me from talking too much. So I want to show in particular how easy it is to use Docker and how little there is, but to do. So I'll just give you a quick show. So this is standard command line. I'm hoping the font is big enough. I tested it on a chat earlier. That should work out. The command line tool is Docker, and you can quickly easily see a list of options you can use and help and so on. But I'm going to show some particular stuff. In particular, I'm going to show some of the cool things. Here you can see a list of images or base boxes that I have on my machine. One interesting thing to note is that there is both Debian and CentOS. I'm going to show you how quickly boxes can start. Start off with just the CentOS box, and let's see. So there, as you can see, I'm inside a box right now. It has basically nothing running on it, but it's very responsive. If you don't think that I'm running inside a container because it started too quickly, I'll just do a yum update, and you can see it's pulling from CentOS repositories, and it's relatively fast. I won't do any updates right now, but yeah. And as I showed, there is nothing running in there. It's just bash. There's no extra services, so things like that can be very fast there. It does, however, have an interface with its own IP. I'll exit there, and I'm back at my my desktop. Instead of CentOS, I could try using Debian, and all of a sudden now I'm in a Debian box, and I can prove it to you by doing Debian equivalent. Let's update and see if there's any new packages and so on and so on. I'm not going to install any applications because I don't want to bother with the effort and confusion right now. You might have noticed that we have multiple versions of, say, CentOS. So maybe you'd like to see if I can run an older version of CentOS, even though I just ran one of the later CentOS. Sure. Syntax issue. This is the same thing, but now I'm in CentOS 5 instead of CentOS 7, which is the latest. I can run any of these at the same time. And I can run 30 of them and barely notice it. If I run 30 copies of Nginx, then yeah, I notice it, but outside of that, I don't. So that is like a quick idea of how fast it is. A much better thing to show though is, say I need on a project, I need a solar engine. What I can do is I can actually search to see if anybody else has already encountered this problem and created a Docker image that runs solar. And as you can see, I've done this before, and I know that there are really a lot. So every line here is an image that somebody's submitted, which is running, which gives you the ability to run solar. I already have one that I've downloaded, but normally you would do Docker pull and then the name of the engine, which takes a bit of time, so I'm not going to include it now. I've already pulled one, and so it's this solar here. So I want to run solar instance on my machine. And solar is running on Tomcat, as you can see. I can run this in the background if I want, instead of running it in the foreground. I can also connect one to another. This use case in particular was really, really useful for me. So I thought I would show that one off. I thought I'd quickly show the process that I use with my Bash script, but probably I'm running out of time, and I call it quits here. If you'd like to see the work building project, it's right now about 30 to 60 seconds going from I start a new project to I have a running machine. And again, I can have as many containers for the machine as I want, which I'm using right now in kind of a Git flow approach where I have one machine running per feature branch or hotfix branch, which can also be shared between people and stuff like that. So, but anyway, I think that's good for Wundertalk. I'll probably stop talking there. But I'll stick around in case anybody wants to ask questions, and you can reach me out in chat whenever you need.
Thank you very much. That was great. Great. Well, I already knew some stuff about Docker, but that's getting a little bit more into details. The demo is great. There's a couple of questions. Well, there's one question from Peter asking, are there any pre-configured Nginx Varnish SQL PHP 5.3 box? This looks just what I need.
Yeah, so first off, I have one, which I built, and I'd be willing to share the build for you. But if you want to know, let's see, I think you said you want a CentOS, Nginx, and probably PHP FPM. Search. Let's do CentOS or Nginx. If you like this and find out. If you want to know, is there a Docker box for that? You don't need to have Docker installed. You can go to Docker, I think it's docker.com or docker.io, and there they have a repository, which is the hub that has all of the boxes, and you can search for them there. It also might be worth mentioning that the CentOS box comes from the CentOS guys. It doesn't come from a guy like me sitting in the corner, just like the Ubuntu box and so on. I was going to pull the Ubuntu box to show, but there's some 18 different images to show. So yeah, there's pretty much anything. In fact, more than there's the Nginx list there. More than that, how about I had to use SOAP UI lately? Is there a box that has SOAP UI in it? These kinds of things. Don't limit yourself to just there's no SOAP UI, unfortunately. Don't limit yourself to just is there something that has everything I need in one box? And the other thing is that everything I need in one box is not what Docker wants us to do. What Docker wants us to do is something like this. Let's have one image that has Nginx and PHP FPM, and then one other image or container that has MySQL or Mariah, because come on, and then one other that has Solr. Every time I do an upgrade to my source, I'll have one container that has that, and I can have multiple containers for different source and multiple images for the web browser, and they can all sort of be running at the same time. I can start the next version, the next deployed version of source code without stopping the previous one. And I can test it before I take down the old one. Don't think of deployment as in, I know I've updated Git, I will have to now go into the production server, put it into construction mode, update the source, rebuild Drupal with Drush, revert all features, and this kind of stuff. No, you have the container running. It's good. Start that in a new container with just Nginx, PHP, FPM, update that. Have it connect to the same database server, probably with a new database. Have it connect to the same file base, if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. So don't think of it all in one box. Think of it as many of them in many boxes. Is there another question?
Well, it wasn't my question, but I think that it is a very good answer. Thank you. And if there are any more questions, feel free to reach out to James in the hip chat. Also, we have WunderCon coming up in 2 weeks already. I think this would be a very interesting topic to just discuss. It might happen over beer at some bar or something like that. But yeah, I think I'm sure there will be some conversations around that topic. I'm very much looking forward to it. For next week, we're going to have also some popular demand a presentation on platform.sh, the hosting platform from Commerce Guys, with whom we have recently, well, upgraded our partnership. And so this is going to be a presentation from me. We've had the chance to use the hosting platform on one relatively big project, and also got to discover a lot of things, how you can use this platform to best advantage, to get the most out of it. So we'll be doing something a little bit hands-on. It's not marketing speed. It's really, hey, how do you use this thing? So if you have any questions, please send them to me ahead of time. And otherwise, we'll see each other next week. I'm probably not going to fill an entire slot, so if there's any other topics, we can definitely have more presentations. And then in 2 weeks, because of the WunderCon, we will not have a Wundertalk, and we'll pick up again in 3 weeks after that. Okay. Then thank you very much, James. That was a great presentation. It's great to have you on the Wundertalks as usual. And yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone soon. Bye.